and welcome to the Ins and Outs of Work, an HR and Future of Work podcast for everyone, for HR professionals who know their stuff, for managers and organizations big and small, or inquisitive employees who simply have an interest in how the world of work is changing. My name is Nelly and I'm your resident HR insider.
And I'm Joe, not an HR person by any means. Therefore, I'm the HR outsider, here to give a bit of an outsider's view. What you need to know is that on this podcast, we do things a bit differently. We mix inside out and outside in perspectives all together, and we speak with industry experts and HR bigwigs about how work is changing in 2021 and even into 2022 nearly.
Yeah.
Today, we are being joined by
Jasper Schonenberg.
Thank you very much, Neely. And he is Global Reskilling and Upskilling Leader at IKEA. Jasper leads the work of developing, implementing, and communicating reskilling and upskilling programs for IKEA employees around the world, and we are so excited to have him on the podcast. Everything he does is with the aim of increasing employability and securing the competencies required for future success at IKEA. Hi there, Neely.
Hi Joe, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for helping me out with the pronunciation there.
You're welcome. He's a fellow Dutchie, so I felt like I had an obligation.
Appreciate it. Before I said Jasper or something. Yeah, that's good. So this is another brilliant episode. We're coming back to this topic of upskilling, reskilling. Earlier in the season, we talked to Hugo from Move One about this topic, but really cool to be able to talk to Jasper about Jasper? Yeah. Jasper. About, his approach to it within IKEA, within a company, and how he's built it.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this one, Joe, and I can't wait to hear what he has to tell us.
Yes, fantastic. So as you know, in season 3, we're in it right now. We're going back to interviewing fantastic people like Jasper today. But we also want to keep the best bits of season 2. If you were following along in season 2, we had the best time. And what we did was we ran season 2 through a bunch of segments. So we had repeating segments every week. We want to keep some of those in season 3. And so here in this episode today, what we're going to do is we're going to cover a bit of a did you know? So a couple of quick facts around this topic, as well as an outsider outpouring, which if you don't know what that is, you're going to have to stick around the next couple of minutes. We're going to do it. It's going to be great. But first, the did you know?
Did you know that according to a Gartner report, building critical skills and competencies topped the list of priorities for no less than 68% of HR leaders in 2021?
Wow, I didn't know that. 68%. That's like a big amount.
Absolutely. The world, here's another did you know for you, Joe. The World Economic Forum predicts as jobs are transformed by the technologies of the so-called fourth industrial revolution that we will need to reskill more than 1 billion people by 2030. These are big numbers.
That's astronomical. 1 billion people need to be reskilled.
Yeah.
Massive.
And the last did you know for you, Joe? McKinsey & Company revealed that 87% of leaders and managers are either experiencing or expecting to face talent gaps in the future.
Man, that's huge. That's quite frightening.
It is. You know what else is frightening, Joe?
No.
It's time for our outsider outpouring.
Whoa. That's probably the best segue I've ever heard. Not even just on this podcast, of all time. And it can be frightening. Fair enough, it can be frightening because what the outsider outpouring is and what we're about to get into right now is a 30-second rant from me, the HR outsider, about this topic. And the reason you say it's frightening is because I try to bring out as much emotion as I can and just really process this stuff through a bit of a rant. So we're going to put the clock on. We're going to give us 30 seconds and here we go. Start the clock. So what does it take to truly upskill and reskill your workforce? A few corporate trainings a year? I don't think so. It's got to be something deeper. I'd suggest that it needs to be viewed more holistically within organizations. There are so many sources of information and learning today. Online, what people do outside of their work. Are those learning opportunities being captured by companies? Are they being facilitated by companies on an ongoing basis? Is learning seen as this kind of holistic thing, or are you just putting people through a, 1 day training here, 1 day training here. What does it look like in your company? Because if I can put my neck out, I don't think putting people through, a 1 day in-person training every once in a while is going to be enough. That's my rant. And I realize I went a bit long.
That's okay.
I had a bit to say,
Yeah. That's okay. Thanks. All right. We are going to our fabulous conversation with Jasper now. But before we do so, please subscribe to our podcast channel on whatever platform you are getting your podcasts from. Like the episode, share it with a friend, and leave us a kind review. Thank you and happy listening.
Yes, enjoy the interview. So great to have you here with us, Jasper. How are you today?
Thank you. Doing fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah, so are we, Jasper. All right, so I think we can dive straight in with a bit of an obvious opening, but very important nevertheless. What can you tell us about yourself, Jasper, and your current role?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Jasper Schonenberg. I'm Dutch. I grew up in the south of the Netherlands. Lived there for most of my life. Studied in Nijmegen, where I studied learning and development in organizations. So from quite a young age, I realized that education and learning was something I was really interested in. First, I went into the direction of primary school teacher. Later on, switched into more of the corporate side of learning and development. So studied in Nijmegen, had a great time there. And afterwards, during the last part of the studies, actually, I started working for IKEA. A brand that I love, a company that I love, and still super happy to work for this company. So I started in the field of learning and development. Worked there for about 6.5 years, mainly developing learning solutions in all kinds of formats, from like more traditional face-to-face to the digital solutions to more performance support as well. Later on, more performance-based solutions for the franchisor of the IKEA brand. And now I'm working actually for one of the franchisees, which is the Inca Group. And in that organization, I'm working as a Reskilling and Upskilling Leader indeed. So I joined this organization in April this year. So relatively fresh, but super excited about the assignment that we have.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for that, Jasper. And it really seems like you had definitely a preference for all things learning and development from a very young age. And I like how you actually worked in a primary school first and then made the jump to the corporate world. Very, very cool to hear. Before we get started, Jasper, maybe it's good for the people who are listening in that we briefly touch on the difference between upskilling and reskilling, because these are two terms that are often being used interchangeably. But so what can you tell us about that?
Exactly. Yeah, it's definitely, when people talk about upskilling, they talk about reskilling and the other way around. And for me, it's very much connected to the skill and the impact that we want to achieve with it. When we talk about upskilling, I personally see that it's very much about adding additional skills basically to the skill set that you already have for the job that you perform today and for the tasks related to the job that you perform today. When we talk about reskilling, it's very much about going into a different career path, going more the wide direction, I would say, and adding the skills needed to pursue that journey.
Okay, yes. But one thing we wanted to explore is the sense that, we've done another episode on upskilling and reskilling, and we've been talking about it as a topic for a little while on the podcast. There seems to be the sense that there's even more of a need, and we've heard people talk about the fact that, well, I don't know if it's a fact, maybe you could help tell us, that we might be in sort of like a reskilling revolution right now. First of all, do you agree that these sort of approaches are becoming even more important? And if so, what sort of has led us to this point? Like, why now?
Really good question. Yeah. So I agree. I mean, when we talk about upskilling, I would say it's relatively closer to the more traditional way of how we look at learning and development. We have been working with like some types of upskilling for a long time, actually. But when we look at reskilling, that's actually for me where I see the difference between how we work with education, actually. So it's looking at like a degree that you get on university. It takes years to get educated into a certain profession. But when it comes to reskilling, we want to shorten the time for people to be able to perform basically in a new job in today's reality. And that's also where there's the upskilling and reskilling are very close connected to when it comes to the words, but the impact that they can achieve and the work that needs to be put into it to do it successfully is very different. So I can talk about that more later in the episode.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask you right away about that. Maybe you can talk about the different approach when it comes to upskilling and reskilling, and then obviously after that about the impact.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so with upskilling, I see it more as going for like you can kick it off quite in a basic way with some simple courses. Later on, give people the opportunity to apply the knowledge and the skills that they learn in those courses. But the thing that makes it, in my eyes, a little bit easier is that there's always a connection to the job that you do today and the skill set that you have already. It's an extension on your current skill set. When I look at reskilling, you're actually going into a completely different direction. You're going wider, which makes it very hard for people to connect the new things that they learn to the previous role. And the reskilling, to make it successful, it's all about giving people the opportunity to turn a skill into a capability. Being able to practice a skill, being able to experiment, being able to get support from a mentor, someone who helps you along the way. During the university, you have your internships as well, right? Like you want to have a look and you want to experience what reality looks like and the new skills that you learn to actually apply them and see how that turns out. And that's what I think also one of the biggest challenges that I see for organizations is how are we going to bridge the gap between people willing and having the motivation and the energy to reskill themselves into a new role, but also like being able to offer that role afterwards and balance, how are we going to manage this?
It's a really interesting point you make there because, yeah, like we were saying, often you lump these two words in together, right? Upskilling, reskilling, but hearing you talk about that, it's so true. Like it's kind of a light bulb moment for me, the sense that it's a completely different approach to the two, right? I'm interested to explore a little bit that reskilling part, if we can. How, like, if we just dive into the practicalities there, like, how does it even practically work a lot of times? Is it the employee saying, I would like to reskill, or is it the company side saying, we have this opportunity to reskill, or how does that conversation even start usually in your experience?
Yeah, so for me, it's definitely two ways. But in my eyes, the company has a very big responsibility in creating transparency. And that all starts with being able to map and to identify the gap between the skills that we have today with our coworker group and the skills that we actually need for the future. And as a company, you have the responsibility to analyze that, to look at data, to start to prepare for that new reality, today's reality actually. And to be transparent about that and make that visible in a very easy way to the people in your organization, so that they know what the possibilities are and what the opportunities are and where they can develop. And then, of course, the next step is to offer a nice journey that helps them to get there and to bridge it from one end to the other.
Yeah, I think this is very, very much linked to internal mobility programs, right? And this is something that we've been talking about on the podcast as well, Joe. And we see that there is so much more attention now from many organizations all over the world for the opportunity that internal mobility can really offer the organization. And yeah, that I think reskilling and internal mobility go hand in hand. I was wondering, Jasper, when you talk about reskilling, Jasper, we have, of course, the one side where people are learning new skills, but then, as you rightly say, there is the whole side of people being able to put those skills into practice and to work with them in their everyday reality. Can you maybe share an example of how organizations can do this, make sure that people can play around with these skills and grow them in their everyday jobs?
Yeah, so it for me, this is very much related to building a longer journey. It's not about like a one-time injection of a course or a one-time injection of like a great face-to-face training where you participate in. It's a longer journey that participants should go through. And Also, when we talk about different formats, it's not a single format that can cover this, in my opinion. It is a combination of different formats that we offer, different learning formats, different learning moments spaced out over a longer period of time that help people to develop the confidence and the new skills that they need for a new role. And we have like learning formats that have been very successful in the past, but I think we're a little bit like less talked about and maybe less used as well in the last couple of years, like things like mentorship. I think it's a fantastic format to use in reskilling. So if you make a connection between someone who has a lot of experience and is used to applying skills in the new reality and connect that person to a person actually who's willing to learn new skills as part of the reskilling journey, it's a fantastic recipe. People can learn from each other. It's about getting an example, seeing how skills are applied, what the effect is of when skills are applied. It's about sharing successes, sharing challenges. So still making the journey longer, but of course, nothing compared to like a 4 or 5 year university study that you have to complete.
Yeah, and I think a really big advantage of having a mentor as well is that usually when people have a mentor, this is a relationship with a lot of trust, at least it should be. So whenever people are struggling with something, they are much more likely to ask their mentor, hey, how should I go about this or that, or this is what I'm struggling with. So yeah, I think that's a very good point.
Exactly. And often it lasts longer as well. So it's not only the time that you're in this upskilling program. If you build a good relationship, you can always reach out to each other again. So just to conclude, like it's a combination with different learning interventions from face-to-face moments to online courses, and definitely like some moments where the new learned skill can be applied and practiced with the support of a mentor. That for me creates a really nice reskilling journey.
Okay. So Jasper, it's that time in the episode where we like to each time cover some myths. Okay, some myths that on this topic, and we like to sort of debunk them because a lot of these topics in HR, there are myths floating around about them. So, wanted to ask you, Jasper, what is your favorite myth, or maybe least favorite even, about upskilling, reskilling, and why is it a myth?
That's a really good question, and actually we spoke about it quite a bit already. And for me, I'm not sure if it's really a myth, but what I realize is when people talk about upskilling and reskilling, that they think it's a similar thing, that it's so closely together that it's like similar efforts to make it happen and to do it successfully. But as we already spoke about in this call, it is two completely different approaches. And one requires much more effort, I would say, from an organizational perspective, and to create and design the journey with enough like support to make it work compared to the other. Because with upskilling, there is already a very strong foundation where you can connect to. And with reskilling, it's not there. So it requires much more effort there.
Sure. No, that's a myth that I had in my head. For sure.
Yeah, actually, basically, this episode being about upskilling and reskilling,
that's the myth.
Yeah. All right. So I think we touched on this a little bit, though, but still. So Jasper, maybe we can start by going back to upskilling for a second, and maybe you can, in a simplified way, walk us through the process of creating an upskilling program from scratch.
Sure. Yeah. So as we spoke about earlier, it's all about starting with identifying the gap. So what is the skill base that we have with our coworkers, and what are the skills that we need in the future? And as soon as you have like a good picture of those two, you can basically start to map it and start to identify what the skills are that you want to develop. And this, in my opinion, can be done like on an organizational level, but it can also be done like on a country level or on a department level, depending on the scope that you have and the people that are a part of your scope. So after mapping that, of course, you go into a phase where you start to design. What I always like to do is to work with the target group, to just spend some time and be there on the shop floor to realize, what does the job look like today, and compare it to what will the job look like tomorrow. And maybe you have some pieces in the organization, some places in the organization where they do tests, where they innovate, where they already have implemented new technologies, for instance. So really to figure out, what is this difference between job A and job B, and help them to get a good picture of what this difference is. So once you have that clarified, you basically know what your today's situation is and where your wish position is. And then it's about, okay, how are we going to support the people to get there, right? So you go into a design phase where it's very much about thinking about the journey, thinking about the different formats, thinking about where can you get your content from. In some cases, you can use subject matter experts who are very strong, like I said, in specific skills from your organization. In other cases, you might need to reach out to people outside your organization with a specific expertise to help develop a program. And what we see lately as well, just to save a lot of time and resources and energy, is to work together with external learning platforms. We have great platforms with things like podcasts, with things like video-based courses on many interesting and exciting topics that we can use and curate from to build basically a nice journey and design a journey for the people that you want to support. And I think that's something for HR and learning and development in specific, that is no longer about developing everything internally. It's about opening up and creating speed by working together with larger organizations who have a broad set of learning resources that you can curate, right?
Yeah, that's interesting, Jasper, because we've also been talking about the concept that employees are consumers as well in their private lives, right? So they have Netflix, they have different services like this. They know where to get entertainment or information. So there's a sense like it's not like you can control all, and you shouldn't maybe want to control all of their learning, world. But it's, as you said, creating those pathways and kind of incorporating a bunch of things that they could already have access to. Is that the kind of thing?
Exactly. Yeah, because you see it with I think it's a thing that is broadly like also outside, corporate learning. It's like I said, on Netflix, on internet, there's so much information out there, and more and more like clever and smart technology that we use to filter, to curate, to structure. And I think that's a responsibility that we have, like in our field of work, to map that, to make sure that people have the right tools and the right skills and the opportunities to find what they really need, or just see what they really need if it's just like based on recommendations. And I think this is important for like the design of like an upskilling program from top down, like I just described, starting from the need of the business and from there starting to create opportunities, but also from the bottom up. I think that's even more important. Imagine as a coworker, I would like to learn more in around a specific skill, but I don't know where to find it, or find it hard to find the right courses or resources to get there, because there's so many out there, right? And that's what I said. It's a responsibility for the business to be transparent and also offer a very nice experience for coworkers to find the things that they would like to learn more about.
Yeah, one thing I was really interested to hear about as well is how you measure success, Jasper. And I guess hearing you talk through that, at the most fundamental level, it's about identifying the skills you need, and then the way you identify success is if you fill, if you got to fill them. But is there anything else you're thinking about in terms of how you're tracking success through the program?
Yeah, good question. Talking from my background in learning and development, it is very hard to measure it. And there have been some movements going more towards performance-based learning, starting with real business KPIs, and from there on start to develop your program, and later on link back to the tasks who impact the business KPIs. Then, of course, in this case, when you talk about reskilling, upskilling, and more like the mobility of people, it's of course like the filling the jobs that are in need. But I think it goes also further than that. Of course, you can fill the job, and you can have a good match between a candidate and a role. But then it's also about performing, right? Are the people able to perform and enjoy as well the roles that they got after reskilling or upskilling program? So I think performance, the manager can of course have a clear view and understanding of how the coworkers is doing. Is he happy? Yes or no? Will they actually go into like different roles, like more, imagine that I go into data analytics, will I go into data analytics manager, do I continue to grow in my field? But I think we just scratched the surface when it comes to these mobility trackers, or at least setting KPIs on mobility. But it's definitely an interesting field to stay on top of.
Yeah, this is very interesting. As actually this morning we were doing a webinar as well around upskilling and reskilling, and so apparently quite a, and let's say an old question in the field is around how do you actually validate and measure skills? How do you do that? And we had an interesting
gained the skill
exactly.
Yeah.
This is tough. It's really hard to do that.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. I've been reflecting on it as well, and I think a skill can be applied in many different contexts. And I think when you want to successfully perform a skill, it depends on the context. So if I can perform a skill in a strong way, in company A, but actually in company B they use different tools, different processes, and I'm not able to perform the skill anymore, then the quality and the effect and the impact of the skill will differ, right? So that's where I see the link between a capability and a skill. And that's also why I find it very important that after, for instance, a course that you do on an external platform, we need to offer people the opportunity to turn that skill into a capability, to practice, to put an assignment on top of it, to give time and space for that as well. Because the certification of a course, it's not everything. It's important, of course. It's nice to get some recognition for the effort that you put in and the knowledge that you acquired, and maybe the skill that you tested and mastered. But creating that capability where you can really apply the skill in your organization is a second thing.
Yeah. Interesting thought, though, that creating that capability, that might be maybe a second step in how we can validate and measure skills. The first step could be actually you acquired a certain new skill, that's done, we can check the box, but then maybe to really be able to validate that, the second step maybe should always be turn that into a capability and make sure that you put it into practice. Interesting.
Very interesting. Jasper, we want to talk a bit about challenges here, or maybe like blockers that, could kind of, derail an upskilling or reskilling kind of program. I want to put one forward first and hear your take on it as well, and then maybe explore more challenges that you see. But one that I've sort of sensed is time, right? It's like being able to carve out enough time, because we all have jobs, we all have things we got to do day to day, but having the space and the time to actually put aside for learning, it's a massive thing. Is that something you really see as well as a challenge?
It is, yeah. And especially, I think, in the retail environment, you have customers around you all the time, and it's you want to help the customers in the best possible way, of course, to create a good experience. And I think also, like in office settings, it's the same thing, right? Emails popping up, appointments here and there. So for me, this is very much something that links to like higher up in the organization, really going on a strategy level and really decide and believe, even though it's hard to measure, having the trust that if you invest time in learning and in upskilling and reskilling, that it will pay out in the end. And it takes some courage, from executives to move in that direction. But it definitely, according to me, it will pay out. And it's also, when you look at filling vacancies with external people versus internal, there's a big saving that you can do there as well. So that's also something, of course, that can be measured. But it goes all the way back to, I would say, on an executive level, deciding and trusting to go for it, yes or no.
And are there any other challenges that you commonly see?
Yeah, one thing that I see is the experience for the coworker, for the end user. Often when we talk about learning, there's a learning management system that coworkers can go through to follow a course. But again, talking about reskilling, it's a journey. It's a bigger process. So I find it, what I see is that like organizations struggle with creating a nice environment for coworkers where they basically, maybe even start when they are recruited. From there on, they can identify, the different skills that they would like to develop, conversations with their manager that they have, maybe get a transparent overview of the jobs that maybe are closely connected to the skills that they already possess today. Maybe, an overview of like the skills that are in demand and the jobs maybe that are connected to it. There's not a nice, seamless experience for coworkers that they can get to make it simple and intuitive for them. And I think this is something that has to come at a certain point. Being able as an organization to be transparent and show this in a very simplistic way so that coworkers know where to go and what options they have.
Yeah, absolutely. So first we have time and then we have more transparency. Yeah. I'm going to recap it like that. Continuing a little bit on the role of HR, could you maybe share one or two priorities that you see in that regard for HR when it comes to upskilling and reskilling, even though we know now that these are very different things?
Very different.
Yeah, sure. Starting with the first one, I think is an important one. It is about recognizing that we also need to upskill ourselves in order to stay relevant and contribute in the best possible way to the organization and to the people that we'll do it for, right? And I often get this example, like when we ask coworkers, how many courses have you done, have you completed? And when I ask the question to colleagues, or people ask the question to myself, how many courses have you completed, on our learning management system? I sometimes realize that I don't complete that many courses myself, so it's a nice eye opener for me as well sometimes, just to keep on investing in myself and making sure that I'm still relevant in some years from now and continue to upskill or even reskill if my heart decides to go there, right? And then I think the second one is about collaboration. I think we still see that many of the roles that we have in HR today, it's focused on recruitment, it's focused on maybe talent management. It's very specialistic. So I think we should go more in a collaborative mode where the way how we work with projects is where we bring different perspectives together so that the deliverable in the end that we create for our coworkers is actually something that goes across instead of sticks into the own specific area of specialism.
Yeah,
very nice.
And yeah, I guess if you see the employee as the kind of customer in a sense of that, they're not thinking, okay, now I'm going into this, talent management space or this recruitment space, but it's organized on the other side in that way. So it's interesting to hear you talk about that. Yeah.
Very. Yeah. Another one about HR. Do you think that HR departments, or from your own experience, are HR departments equipped with the right skills for this task to basically set the right environment for upskilling and reskilling in the organization?
I think these skills, of course, differ from organization to organization, and it's just nice to see in with my colleagues that people are searching for collaboration, and it's definitely clear, that this is the direction to go for. So yeah, I'm happy to see that we're heading into that movement, that people search for working together, starting more projects across the different specialisms that we have. And thereby, like I said, create solutions that are more wider, and cover the full journey instead of just a small piece with another login code and password and for each of the platforms that we work with, right?
And one final question, Jasper. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much again for your time. One thing we like to do to sum a bit of all of this up is to, think about the people listening in. So we've got people who are managers, we've got people who are HR people, possibly even L&D people as well. What sort of, if you had to sum it up, what challenge would you leave to them? What action would you say, if there's one thing in the week to come that you could start to do, what would it be?
So I would say take a moment, if it's 15, 20 minutes, and search for 2 to 3 skills that are interesting for you to upskill yourself in the upcoming months. Just for yourself, even if you do not put action on it today, just for yourself to become aware of, what is the direction that my field is heading. And that awareness already, I think, will create some kind of energy, some kind of interest for yourself in the upcoming months that you will talk about it with colleagues. Just to become aware, because like I said, we're also part of the people who need to upskill and develop ourselves on a continuous basis. Things go fast, there's new tools every day, there are new challenges every day, and it's also fun, right? Like internet is a fantastic source for that. So if you search for the name of your role and you type like the future of, and you type the name of your role, there are so many fantastic insights that you can get, where your role is heading. So that will be my challenge. Take 15-20 minutes and do a quick search.
Great challenge. Any last thoughts from you, Neely?
No, loving the challenge.
Loving the challenge. You going to do that this week?
Definitely.
Yeah, me too. I'm going to do that this week. Thank you so much, Jasper. This has been fantastic and great to have you on the podcast. For those of you who have been listening in, we would just love to encourage you to subscribe if you're not already subscribed. If you're on Apple Podcasts, we'd love you to leave us a 5-star rating. If you don't want to leave us a 5-star rating, just don't leave us a rating. And tell a friend about this podcast, because we're taking it to the world. But we'll see you again next week with another great episode. Bye.
Bye.